today we're going to talk about yields in recipes. So there can be times where you would like to account for any shrinkage or waste on products. Some good examples are produce, fish, and meat. So what you can do is change the yield on a particular item, or you can even create a prepared item for that product and then associate that product with menu items. So let's look at an example as to what I'm talking about. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create our recipe. And at the very bottom, we're going to go ahead and put our ingredients. So if we use the example of tomato. So I'm going ahead and typing in tomato, and we're just going to use fresh tomatoes, for example. And in this recipe, you can say that there's 1 cup of tomatoes that go in here. Now, according to the most recent purchase price, a cup of tomatoes costs you $1.62. However, with tomatoes, you cut the ends off, you throw those away, and maybe you want to account for that waste. So you can go ahead and change that yield from 100% to 90% if that's what that tomato yields with those ends off. And you're going to see your cost goes up to $1.80. So this is one way to do it at the product level. So every time you create a recipe that includes tomatoes, you can go ahead and change the yield on it every time you add that ingredient. Or you can even create a prepared item for it. So let's go back to the example of beef. So we could do beef or brisket, right? When you have the brisket, you cut the fat off, you cook it, and you get a shrinkage. So you want to account for that yield. So I'm going to go ahead and just use a beef pismo as an example. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a prepared item for this pismo so that every time we add this beef pismo into our menu item, it takes that yield into account. So what I'm going to do at the top is I'm going to say pismo beef prep. We're going to go ahead and we'll just add it into our batch recipe and recipe type, and then we're just going to say it yields a batch. And then we're going to say 1 pound is in this. And again, we're going to show you, according to the most recent purchase price, that 1 pound of beef pismo does cost you $16.34. However, when we trim the fat off, when we cook it, we actually only get an 80% yield out of this. So you're going to see when I change it to 80%, the cost now goes to $20.42. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as a prepped recipe. Now, the nice thing about me creating a prepared item for this is that every time we want to use that product, that pismo beef, in any of our items, it's going to take into account that yield. So say, for example, we're creating a menu item, and on our dish we have asparagus, we have mashed potatoes, and we have that beef on there. So when we account for that, we're going to, name it, fill all this in. And at the bottom, we're going to add all our ingredients. So again, let's look for beef. So you can see here that we did create that prepared item beef prep pismo, and it shows it as a batched recipe. And we can say maybe in this dish, there's, 2 batches, which would be 2 pounds in this recipe. So again, this now takes into account that yield that we created. If we were to just use the raw product here and we say 2, here we go. Here we'll say 2 pounds goes into this because, as we know, the batch we set up was 2 pounds. You're going to see that the raw product itself is costing you $32.68, not accounting for that yield. But when we created that batch recipe with that yield in it, that cost for 2 pounds of the pismo is now $40.85. So this is how you would account for waste, again, or shrinkage in your products. And you can just do it at the product level every time you create a recipe, or you can create a prepared item with that yield. And then every time you use that prepared item, that yield is taken into effect.